deserves all your applause. And we're here because God is really good. Because I just this evening was going to happen anyway, but it was going to be a little different. But I happened to be, on Facebook, which I live on. Everybody who knows me knows this. And I saw Loretta post that her book had come out. And I said, hey, are you going to plan a trip into the Bay Area? And she said, well, it just so happens I will. I'm going to do that. And she was going to be at an event like tomorrow, right?
Right.
And I said, well, I'm having an event on the 5th. And she said, well, girl, let's sell our books together. And so here we are. So I want to really thank her for her generosity in doing that and making that offer, and that we're here today. So I want to turn things over to you first, and to have you talk about your book and anything you'd like to share about that. And I'll talk about my book a bit, and then we'll have Q&A and then more food and cake.
All right. Well, first of all, thank y'all for welcoming me to the Bay Area. I'm from Atlanta. I'm a Southern child, but I actually have lived in California for a while, so I try not to tell anybody that. But I did spend 4 years in Watson, Los Angeles, when I was a child. We're a Texas family, and Texas people migrate west. And I'm the only one that went east from my entire family. Only one, but who can tell? A little bit about background about myself. I became an activist because I got pregnant in high school in the 1960s through incest. And it was very common then to kick girls out of school who were pregnant. And so not only did I not have any choice over whether I was going to have sex, I didn't have any choice over whether I was going to have a baby. And my only choice was whether or not I would keep the child. Because it was very common to give babies up for adoption back then. And talk about that birth mother magic. Even though I was not supposed to see my son after his birth, the nurses made a mistake and brought him to me the next day. And I took one look at his face and kept saying, he's got my face, he's got my face, he's got my face. And it was in that moment, I was a mother, because I had not planned that incest pathway to motherhood. And I bring him into the room now because after 47 years of joy, he died last year unexpectedly from a heart attack. But he's the reason I became a feminist, working on sexual assault and incest and reproductive injustices and all the things that had happened to me. It just ignited a fire in me that women should have choices about if and when they have sex, if and when they have children, if and when they can stay in school. By the way, my school kicked me out for being a pregnant mom, and we had to sue the San Antonio Independent School System for my right to return. And so that's basically a lesson in don't piss me off. That didn't really turn out well for the other folks.
Yeah.
And so I had the joy, years later, of being in Chicago with 11 other Black women in 1994. And Hillary Clinton was leading President Clinton's campaign to reform healthcare. And for some reason, the Democratic Party always thinks they can sneak things by Republicans and they won't notice. They're mean, but they ain't necessarily blind, right? And so they thought that if they omitted reproductive health care from healthcare reform, they could get the Republicans to support it. What do y'all think? Didn't work. But anyway, we 12 Black women looked at this strategy and thought they'd lost their minds. Because reproductive health care is the #1 reason women go to the doctor. I mean, after menstruation, putting your feet up in those stirrups and having that cold speculum cranked open is your second unbecoming a woman experience.
Exactly.
You know? And so we decided to protest that. And we decided that our strategy was going to be to take an ad out in the Washington Post as a way of getting the federal people's attention. But because we came from 12 different organizations, we didn't know what framework we were going to use or how we were going to name ourselves. And some of us worked at mainstream organizations like NARAL and Planned Parenthood. I did anti-Klan work at the time. I wasn't even working at a women's organization. Some worked for the National Black Women's Health Project or the Chicago Abortion Fund. One was a midwife. I mean, we were just from all over the place. But we decided that one of the problems we had was the isolation of abortion from all the real social justice issues we experienced as Black women when we centered ourselves in the lens. Because every time a woman, and forgive me for using this language when I speak historically, I use terms woman. I understand that everybody who needs an abortion and doesn't get pregnant is a woman, but I'm speaking historically now. But every time a woman's period is late, she has this like, oh my God conversation take place in her brain. You know, it's like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Who am I gonna tell? What am I gonna do? Will I stay in school? Will I tell my mama? What my partner is? Oh my God. And if you don't address those upstream, oh my God questions, arriving in her life when she's deciding whether or not to continue or terminate a pregnancy is a little late. Because the answers to those oh my God questions determine whether or not an unplanned pregnancy becomes a wanted one or a wanted pregnancy is kept. You gotta answer the oh my God questions. And so those oh my God questions to us are human rights issues. Do you have a job? Do you have a safe place to live? Do you have a quality school system? Will you experience violence if you tell your partner you're pregnant? I mean, these are human rights issues that the pro-choice, pro-life framework don't even address and stuff. And so what we did was take the concept of reproductive rights and splice it with the concept of social justice. And so that's how we created the term reproductive justice, because we embedded that whole conversation around reproductive politics in a social justice framework and used the human rights framework. We then went on and purchased a full-page ad in the Washington Post. We got 836 Black women to sign on to the ad, including Angela Davis and Veronica Webb and a whole lot of famous people. Alice Walker signed it. I mean, we were like, so. So we did this in 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, we raised $40,000, got over 800 women, and put a big splash in the Washington Post. And from there, reproductive justice just took off. We created this framework because we centered ourselves in the lens and asked what would Black women want from healthcare reform. But we didn't realize that this was a process that was actually very universal, because everybody gets a chance to center themselves in the lens and say, what do I need in order to protect my human rights and stuff. And so it's taken off like a flame. And the short definition of reproductive justice that I prefer to use is, first of all, we work with the pro-choice movement because we fight for the right not to have kids, which includes birth control, abortion, abstinence if you can hold on. I ain't abstaining from shit in my life. I'm trying not to curse on your film in case you want to show it to somebody respectable. You know? But we come from communities of color. So we have to fight equally as hard for the right to have the kids we want to have under the conditions under which we want to have it, which is where the birth justice framework comes into the conversation. You know, the right to come develop our birthing plans and have them respected and to not see our children as a burden on society or future terrorists or future criminals or whatever they want to assign through their white supremacist lens to our children. And then the third tenet of reproductive justice is we fight for the right to raise our children in safe and healthy environments. And so that brings us into conversation with the Black Lives Matter movement, the so-called war against Muslims and the anti-immigrant stuff and the environmental justice stuff. I mean, there is no field of human endeavor that is not affected and does not affect reproductive decision-making by people. You know? And so this isolation of discussion on reproduction only to biological processes, in my mind, is a fundamentally flawed analysis, because every nation needs bodies. And what reproductive justice tells is who is reproductively advantaged and who is reproductively disadvantaged. You know, and so it ain't that deep a framework to understand. The hard part is achieving it. You know, so just to finish up with talking about the book, we developed this framework in 1994. In 2003, my former organization, SisterSong, debuted it to the world at our first national conference at Spelman College in Atlanta, Georgia. 600 women of color came there, and after that, it just went off. Asian Communities for Reproductive Justice renamed themselves using the RJ framework. I think they're now forward together, but at the time, they were Asian Pacific Islanders for Reproductive Health, and they were the first organization to rename themselves using reproductive justice. Now we got Planned Parenthood, now NARA, all of them trying to say they're reproductive justice organizations. And so, well, I'm not here to offer a critique of that, because I talk about that in the book. As long as you are integrity of what we mean by reproductive justice, you can use the framework. Like I said, it's a universal framework. What you can't do is reduce it and de-radicalize it. Because that's what we won't let you get away with.
Yeah.
You know, because you can't just, pretend that human rights don't matter, that it didn't come from the lived experiences of Black women, But then, you got a problem. But we'll just roll up, take you outside and roll the ground with you for a little while. Like I said, I don't practice respectability. I'm a cruddy, what I call myself, a slutty crone. I ain't even trying to be respectable that way. But if you, hold integrity with the framework, it is applicable, because every human being has the same human rights. But whether we're reproductively advantaged or disadvantaged explains what we need from the human rights framework in order to protect our human rights. And that's where intersectionality comes in, because a lot of people that think that intersectionality is just an expression of how different every human being is, which they are, that's a given. But intersectionality is not just markers of difference, it's markers of oppression. That's how intersectionality is supposed to be used. And so, when someone tells you, well, my father was a Welsh miner, and so I'm just as oppressed as you were. Yeah, that's because everything under neoliberalism gets commodified and pimped.
Right.
And so now intersectionality has become a new buzzword that everybody wants to claim as many identities as they can to divorce themselves from toxic masculinity and whiteness. It don't work that way. And so everybody has the same human rights. What else I want to say about the book? Well, let me tell them about the book, because I can talk. After the framework became so popular, I became deeply concerned that we had lost control of the narrative. Even encountering people who told us that they had invented reproductive justice. And, I'm like, excuse me, that's an Elvis move. Where you steal something and then you claim you invented it. And then you make all the money while everybody else talks about, he didn't invent rock and roll and the blues, but I call it the Elvis effect. Anyway, and so, but I was concerned because I was still running SisterSong at the time, so I didn't have the time to actually write our history as one of those 12 Black women. But I did start a SisterSong anthology that I've got cards for that will be out this November, which is 40 essays from radical women of color and white women on reproductive justice. So I got to remember to pass out those cards. But my co-author, Rickie Solinger, is a Jewish woman in New York who's written now 13 books on reproductive politics. And Rickie is by far my most quoted author. And the reason she is because as an activist, I'm always looking for authoritative scholars who center white supremacy in their analysis. And Rickie ain't never had to be reminded of that. You know, most writers, they get a beat too late, if they get it at all. Rickie always has written with a strong racial, anti-white supremacist and anti-capitalist analysis in all of her previous 12 books. Well, the University of California Press approached her in the summer of 2014 and asked her if she would write her next book on reproductive justice. And Rickie said, hell to the no. She said, I didn't create this stuff, but I know who did. And so she pushed back on them and made them hire me. She turned over the entire advance to me. That's how an ally is supposed to work, right? And she decided that I become lead author. She said, that's your theory, Loretta. That ain't my theory. Why are they always asking the white woman to write about colored women? You know, well, of course we know why. And so that's why I always want to give her big up and much respect, because there are very few women of privilege I know who would not have slapped their entire brand all over this Black women's framework. You know, I just don't know that many, because we see it all the time, intersectionality, identity politics. You know, the Black feminist canon is just, you know, appropriated and then misused. You know, I'm offering a strong critique of the misuse of identity politics right now, because we created this framework, not we, because I wasn't part of the Combahee River Collective, but they created that framework as a way for us to define who we are as Black women. Now it's been so misappropriated that people are using it to define who everybody else ain't. That's white supremacy, being preoccupied with defining the other so that you can distinguish him from yourself. And I don't care what kind of radical language you want to wrap around that process. There is nothing original about that. Okay? I'm just saying. Okay, back to the book. You can see I like talking. And this, I've been on 20 cities in 6 weeks, and this is the last one, so. And then the people who were supposed to bring me to San Francisco canceled, but I couldn't stand up Samsarah, so. Thank you. So I'll be happy to get home tomorrow. And so, I was gonna talk about the book. Keep remembering about the book. We wrote the book in 14 months, thanks to Rickie's discipline as a writer. It took me 10 years to get radical reproductive justice out. It took me 14 months to work with Rickie and get that out. And so always, if you got to partner with somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of, you know, pushing books out. I mean, I have things I want to write, and they're like farts I can't hold in. You know? But, you know, it still takes that discipline and that art and that getting up. You know, one of the things Rickie said, you know, Loretta, you know what writers do? I said, what? She said, writers write.
At the end.
Right. So we started the book with history because U.S. history needs to be retold through a reproductive justice lens. And talk about the wealth accumulation and the genocide of Native Americans. You have to depopulate a land to repopulate it. I mean, and that story is not told through an RJ lens enough for us. And then the forced breeding of the enslaved Africans, the exclusion of Asian Americans, so that, not only did people don't think about miscegenation. They think of miscegenation, forbidding racists to marry and have sex as only a black and white issue. But do you know Asian men were forbidden to have sex with anybody but Asian women until the 1960s by law?
1960.
Huh?
1960?
1964 Civil Rights Act.
Wow.
By law.
Yeah.
So isn't that what you call population control?
Yeah.
And so that's what reproductive justice does. It explains those kinds of intersections that aren't obvious, but end up being reproductive management. And that's why I want to say we need to emphasize non-biological processes as strongly as we emphasize biological processes to understand how people are advantaged or disadvantaged. The second chapter in the book is about reproductive justice and injustices in the 21st century, coming out of history, looking at the present. The third chapter is telling how to do abortion rights activism through a reproductive justice lens. Because there is a need to do abortion rights activism. These suckers are crazy. And trying to restrict abortion as a way to compel white women to have more kids. Because if they could restrict abortion to women of color, they'd send Cadillacs to take us to the clinic. We know that.
Yes.
And if you don't have a sturdy analysis of white supremacy, you don't even understand reproductive politics in America. Because you just can't do it through an anti-misogyny lens. That is an insufficient and thin explanation from an RJ perspective. And then the fourth chapter talks about the human right to raise your children and what are all of those issues in there, which brings us in a conversation with Black Lives Matter and environmental contaminations and the war machinery and the defunding and deconstruction of the educational system and gentrification and all the other issues that affect our ability to successfully parent. And then the fifth chapter and the final one are examples of reproductive justice organizations, including ICTC is in there, International Center for Traditional Childbirth, because I wanted to also highlight a strong birth justice organization in the successful applications of RJ. So that's the book. Thank y'all for coming out to support me and Samsarah. I'm sorry I was only able to bring a limited number of copies of the book. We tried to contact a local bookstore to see if they could set up, but it would have taken them 3 weeks to receive the book, so they wouldn't have gotten here in time for this event. But if you want to purchase the book, there's a couple of ways. It, of course, is available on Amazon. But does Jeff Bezos really need to get richer by us? I just don't think so. What I encourage you to do is to contact either a feminist or a progressive bookstore and order it through them. They can ship it to you just like Amazon can. And then you support progressive and feminist bookstores at the same time. And just, Google feminist bookstore. Huh?
Cheers bookstore in Atlanta.
Yeah, Karis in Atlanta. Wild Irish Books down in Gainesville, Blue Stockings in New York. I don't know if there's a feminist bookstore in the Bay Area.
There is the Marcus Garvey bookstore.
The Marcus Garvey bookstore. Okay, they can use it. They can use it because we need to talk about Black patriarchy as a reproductive justice issue. So anyway, this ain't that speech. But one of the things that's very clear to us as Black women is that Black men are always in our conversations, but they ain't never there in the room.
Right.
And so we need to have that conversation too. So anyway, that's the book. It's been my joy to get it out there before somebody slapped their name to our framework and then tried to claim they invented it and stuff. And yes. all I can say is I have that sense of urgency, and so I was so glad that Rickie was a sister in spirit and made it happen for me. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
So, why did I make myself follow that? What was I thinking? But I'm just so honored on so many levels. My life is so rich, and this looking in this room, I just feel so fabulous. And want to thank again all of my whole household was engaged in helping this evening happen, and in both of my book projects, my kids were very, very much involved with critiquing and the layout, and in this beautiful book, the cover and the layout of the book was designed by a beautiful human being who was actually one of my first, not a first client, one of my first clients here in the Bay Area, for sure, definitely. Lita is not here, I'm sad to say, but I just wanted to hold her up. When I spoke to her about helping me to design and put together this book, my first book, Children's Village, was really my son's, and it was a lot of male energy in the book, which is fine and lovely. But this book, I felt I needed it to be different. And the first thing I said to her, I looked at her and I said, I wanted to be pretty. So this is the direction she got from the author. Pretty book. And within 20 minutes, really literally like 25 minutes, she zapped me this PDF on my computer. And isn't it?
Yes.
And so here's the thing. We know, beautiful pregnant ladies, they're living in another side of their brain, and whether they know it or not, like their ancestors are chatting at them. And suddenly things smell differently when you're pregnant, when anybody has carried a baby, you kind of know, like you get spidey sense, and you're drawn to pretty things, right? And our First Nations mothers and sisters tell us that pregnant ladies especially should walk in what? Beauty, right? And I wanted beautiful pregnant folks to be attracted to this pretty little book because there's information in here that I hope will help them stay alive. Because we live in a country where far too many women die during an event that they should never die. No woman should die in childbirth. It should be an incredibly rare thing. You should have to go back many generations. And people, would remember the drought where there 5 years ago, where there wasn't enough and some ladies died after having their babies. But here we are in allegedly the most powerful country on the planet. And we have the worst outcomes for our women of any industrialized country. That's unacceptable. And in that pool of women, the browner the woman, the more likely she is to die. Also unacceptable. And the browner the child, the more likely it is to die before its first birthday. Unacceptable. And every time we turn around, there are conferences and workshops and people handing out little stickers and pens like, why are Black women dying? And I've been watching this. I've been blessed to be a birth worker for 37 years, and I've worked with all manner of birthing people. I've been so, so blessed, all ages, from teen mamas to mamas in their 40s, mamas in their early 50s. And I've seen all of the things that impact mamas of different colors and socioeconomic backgrounds. But why are we still having these workshops and conferences? Because it's right there in front of us. And all of those populations that I serve, there's an amazing lack of information about our bodies. We're talking about our rights and our reproductive rights. We have the right to know how amazing and powerful our bodies are.
Yes.
And there was a reason that the female body was worshipped as God for thousands of years. with the support and love of her male partner or her community or her partner of whatever gender her partner. The human bodies is amazing and powerful thing, not for domination, but in sharing the bounty of this beautiful planet. And women are the walking embodiment of that, how our bodies grow, how our babies grow inside of us, how they develop out of the food we eat, the prayers we say, the company we keep. And we come together with our sisters, our devoted brothers and partners, and birth those babies in an act that looks like sheer insanity. But it's not. It's the face of God. And I want women to know that. I want birthing people to know that. Because what you hear in this country is something very different. When I had my babies, I was 19 years old. I had two big, fat, beautiful baby boys. They're handsome young men sitting in the room now, and one's a daddy of his own beautiful child, my beautiful 16-year-old grandchild, Jasmine. There she is. And that was the first, after a very horribly abusive childhood, having them and birthing them was my first step into what transcendence looks like. It was the first opportunity for me to not curse my body, and for me to love my body, and for me to love these beautiful babies, and be devoted as best I can. Certainly, no one's perfect at this stuff, because being a parent is on-the-job training. But I knew for a fact that if there was anything that I could do for them, I would. And if that was my life, I would. And that devotion to them and in my other babies that came along, and I've been blessed to be a mom in a lot of different ways. You know, I have 3 children I birthed biologically. I am a stepmom, I am an adopted mom, I am a mom-in-law, I'm a foster mom to half the city. You know? And there's just been so many different ways to walk this path, and it's such a beautiful path. I was born and raised, and I am still a practicing Catholic. And I think that this moment right now is an answer to a dream of mine, and it's what I want to be the beginnings of many more conversations between, I hate the paradigm of pro and con of anything, because there's so much magic in the middle that gets missing when people take sides and fight each other. Meanwhile, there are corporations and misogynists and racists making buku dollars off of our discomfort and our dead bodies and our dead babies. So if we want to create a world, speaking as a practicing Catholic, if we want to have a world where there are less abortions, then there needs to be jobs for people. There needs to be employment. There needs to be health care. There needs to be education. There needs to be a value for real people as opposed to corporate people. And, you know, a more than basic understanding of these amazing bodies and what they do and what they can't do. We have a lot more power over our reproduction than we're taught. And I would like us to know that. This little beautiful book is a start. It's meant to be a lovely gift for someone who's having a baby or someone who wants to know about having a baby. It is full of just basic stuff, you know, looking at pain medications and C-sections and controversies. It's full of wonderful references. It's a starting point. Its point is to not lecture to anybody, but to give people a starting place and a place to go to start learning about this stuff. Sadly, we start to learn about having babies when we're in the midst of having one.
Mm-hmm.
I hope.
If then.
If then. If
I
then.
don't recall getting that memo.
If then. I would love it to be a gift that people give to, you know, young women at their red party when they're starting their bleeding times. that folks sit around and talk about. And we think about these things long before, it's time to have a baby, or we're starting to have a baby and we're thinking about these things, and we're thinking about more than the corporate spiel on it, not the commercial from the Infamil people, okay? And in every aspect of having a baby, there are choices to be made. There is no one way to do it. And in order for people to make informed choices, they have to know the pros and cons. That's the only time we want to have that conversation. Here's a group of people A's opinion, group of people's B opinion, but what do you want to do? Mommy, daddy, community, what do you want to do? How do you want to do this process? How do you want to walk through it? What do you want to feel? Why should you feel? Well, why would one want to feel all that stuff? Why would one not want to feel all that stuff? These conversations have to be had in non-judgmental ways. And I, at the end of the day, will choose to trust the birthing woman, the birthing person, to make the best decision for themselves. I have a lot of faith that if everybody had all the information, there'd be fewer abortions, there would be fewer medicated births, might be some, but I think there'd be a lot fewer. And especially if we had, the infrastructure of basic things, food, shelter, education, and on. So this book is a starting place. I'm going to have another book coming out later in the year, which is going to be entitled Birth, the Black Woman's Survival Guide. And that book I consider it's like my magnum opus. And my vision around that book is that everything that I have shared with clients over 37 years is that book. So that if a mama does not have her own doula, if she gets that book, she'll have a good approximation, and every other page encourages her to go get a doula, because, it's really important. It's more than incredibly important. And as I was saying earlier, we Black women, it's important for us to remember that we're here because we are the daughters of those who refuse to die. And so we cannot let something that ought to be as beautiful and nurturing and soul expanding as having our babies kill us. And we have to stop handing ourselves over to this process that hates us. And the way to do that is to understand why we should love ourselves. So books like this, books like Loretta's book, my other book coming out, and I know that there are other beautiful sisters sitting there writing books. I want to send them strength and love and remind them, yes, write every day. That's the only way to do it. In this time of rebirth, our sister Leah reminds us that we are in, we're in this time in labor. This would be transition. Right now, we're in transition, and it's scary, and we don't know if we can do it, and we don't know if we're going to make it. And this process feels like it's going to kill us. And it's important for us to be good midwives, good birth workers to each other, and good doulas to each other, because what do doulas say during transition? It's like, you got it, honey. You can do it. It's your body, it's your baby, this is your moment. And you're gonna step through that door to the rest of your life, and it's gonna be beautiful. And all the clients look at you like you're crazy when you say that, right? Clients are like, what are you talking about? Right? And then when they push their babies out, what do they say? Oh my God. I can't believe I did that. And it's like, yeah, you are that powerful. So I want to close up my comments by just reminding us all, let's all take a deep breath into our power, and let's keep stepping in it, and let's never let anyone take it away from us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to open things up if someone would like to ask a few questions. Who's pointing? Oh, there's a hand camera.
It's very Loretta. So in your book, I'm wondering if you can comment on if you address Dr. Francis principles and theories of
Color?
white women annihilation and reproductive justice.
Yeah, I actually knew Frances before she passed. We had many debates on her theory. Like any other source of knowledge, there's things that I agree with, there's things I don't agree with. The thing that I loved about her work was her staying really focused on attempting to explain how white supremacy works. And then she talked about the internalization of white supremacy by Black people, which I also thought was very useful. The part that I disagreed with is I'm not a biological determinist. I don't believe in angel devil theories. There are good Black people, there are bad Black people, there are good white people, there are bad white people. I just am much more nuanced than that theory can hold sometimes. But for its time, it was groundbreaking. And it came out, if I recall, in the late 70s, early 80s. I know the time I debated her on it, it was probably like 81, 82 or something like that, and stuff. And so that's what I say to all knowledges. You should read them. You should have, if you can, your own way of sifting from them what is good, and then offering a critique of what is not. But I can read a cereal box and find some knowledge on it, so, because there's a whole lot I don't know. But I always make sure that I have a framework through which I can determine what works for me and what doesn't work for me. That doesn't mean just because it doesn't work for me, can't work for somebody. It just means it don't work for me. Y'all are familiar with the term hotep? It's one of those theories that give the hoteps a lot of
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think we should always respect the sister because she did have her PhD. She was smart as hell. But she got wedded to a theory and tried to ride it too long.
Are you working with other communities internationally? I know Brazil has a really high C-section rate, and I'm from Puerto Rico, so as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Oh, no, that I'm wondering around this reproductive justice framework, are you working with any other communities internationally?
I'm not, and I haven't been for 10 years because this is what retirement looks like. And kind of once I qualified for Social Security and had a chance to just sit and think and write, that's what I've done. I did most of my international solidarity work and global solidarity work in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Okay.
You know, but you know, I just don't get on those long plane rides anymore. California's about all the stamina I got. But what I tried to do is really encourage the newer generations to do so, because I think that there's a drop-off back. For us, we tried to integrate working in the United States and working globally seamlessly. So I would bring the same passion to going to Nicaragua, El Salvador, Brazil, that I would to going to, you know, East LA and you know, the Barrio in San Antonio. It was the same struggle against imperialism and white supremacy. I didn't see any difference. One of the critiques that I'm offering is, like I said, a slutty crumb. We get to say what we want because we really don't have any F's left to give. Is that the really, really good thing that body of people calling themselves third wave feminists did was self-care. Because we second waivers totally missed that memo, you know, and we thought we were supposed to die for the movement. And we just all chose slow suicide to do so. Because, well, but then, you know, our lived reality was bullets from COINTELPRO and stuff like that. So we didn't think we were going to even make it to our 60s and 70s and 80s because too many people did. That's very nihilistic. Don't repeat that kind of thinking kind of way. So I love the way that the third waivers have done self-care and made it a central understanding that if you don't care of yourself, take care of yourself, you can't take care of the world. Where I think they've gone too far is that they've become too navel-gazing, too focused on self-care, and what has dropped off is the global solidarity work. You know? And you can't become that insular and build a global human rights movement. Okay? And I don't hear them talking about we should do an exposure tour to see how, you know, what's happening in the Philippines 2 decades after Marcos. You know, does South Africa need a new Free South Africa movement to free them from neoliberal capitalism?
Yes,
We don't even, I know they do, but I'm just saying, we don't have those conversations because we're too busy calling each other out for some bullshit. Oh, I don't think they should wear pink pussy hats because I got you. If all the conversation you have is over who has a pink pussy hat, I'm trying to create space for that, but it's very hard for me to take that seriously. And getting it, well, I'm glad all them women marked. I'm glad they finally woke up. If you got to brag on how woke you are, that shows me how unwoke you actually are. So we got to build a movement against fascism, not fashion.
Thank you.
See, an elder can talk shit. And I take license to do that. Did you want to answer that question?
I think I'm gonna let you hold that one. See, Jocelyn, I see.
So, thank you for saying that, because doing the work that I do with Samsarah and being a young millennial woman, it is hard when my feminist friends get into that, and I think you called it exactly how it is. So I'm wondering, do you think it's like, you know, the pendulum swinging and we're getting to a fourth or fifth wave that is more intersectional and integrated and whole, or is that just humanism? Because to me, I'm just like, at this point, I'm a humanist, because I can't identify with the actions people are taking in the name of that second or that third wave feminism anymore.
Okay. Well, the thing that I'm aware of is that there are as many feminisms as there are feminists. So anybody that's trying to be doctrinaire over feminism, they also ain't woke. Yeah, so they don't perfectly understand feminism if they think you need to be one just like them. It just reveals their thinness of their analysis. They're trying to build a cult. They ain't trying to build a movement. You know? And that's just a very shallow analysis. But your question raises another place I get in trouble at. So I'm about to throw it out there because I like staying in trouble. I like just dropping those fart bombs. And this is another ideological one. Because I get a lot of questions about the tensions that are being created between female-bodied people who call themselves women and trans people who are transitioning or have transitioned into the identity that is their human right to choose. And I don't know how to answer that question yet. But one of the things that I'm beginning to try to parse out is that one of the ways white supremacy works is to presume a neutrality that ain't really there. Right? Because they presume that the legal system is race neutral and colorblind. Is it? They presume that their science is objectively neutral. Is it? You know? And so what I'm saying, beginning to ask is what is there about this pushing, aggressively pushing on our consciousness the concept of gender neutrality, and will that actually serve us? Because I've seen race neutrality serve white supremacy. I've seen science neutrality create a whole body of scientific racism. And I'm wondering if gender neutrality will reinforce misogyny. I'm just asking the question.
Good question.
Because there's been no experience where neutrality has worked to help the oppressed people. Yeah, and so I do not have any answers, and y'all can leave here, call me whatever you want, because I really don't have enough to give on that. But I tend to look at things theoretically now, because I've spent 45 years being an activist, and I'm still trying to explain what all this means.
Yeah.
You know, and so when I can try to analyze behaviors and outcomes and attach a theory to it, that's when I feel like I'm getting somewhere. And I know there's a gender continuum, I know there's a race continuum, there's a citizenship continuum. There's no such thing as the binaries. That's the good conversation.
Right.
That's the good conversation. To get away from the fixity of the binaries. I got that memo.
Yes. Right.
But that's like saying to get rid of racism, we got to go colorblind.
Right.
I'm not wiping out my identity so you can stop being racist. Now, your racism didn't create my identity, and I ain't gonna let you assume that it's yours to take away. And so it's very complicated. And one of the problems, though, is that as someone who performs heteronormativity, because I don't nobody know who I sleep with, it depends on who's cute, but you know, I perform heteronormativity. I got that memo. At the same time, even to have this conversation about is neutrality a framework that can work for us, gets me accused of being a trans-exclusive radical feminist.
Yeah.
Because I just don't fall into the group think right yet. I just ain't there yet. I may get there. I just ain't there yet because I'm still in the questioning phase of what framework do we need that pulls us all together versus what framework preoccupied and talking about how we're apart.
I really want to appreciate everything that you just said because it's so much that I've been thinking and feeling and praying about. And to me, neutrality is not a good thing. To me,
It needs to be,
it's not reality. It's about celebrating all the amazing, brilliant ways there is to be a human being. It's a deep, rich story with a lot of gray area. And we can embrace that gray area. And once we try to seek it, people did the similar thing when they had to develop a word for God, I guess. You go back further in religious thinking, there is no word for God. God is just everything. And then people put God in a box, and then it's just been stuck there, poor God, ever since. And then people have been saying wacky things about it and telling other people how to be and think ever since. And we humans, I don't know what it is in our nature that we will take something amazing and all wondrous, and then we seek to put it in a little tiny box so that we can feel safe with it. And it just definitely seems to be the way misogyny works. Misogyny is all about everything needs to be really, really tiny except for the sense of power that the misogynist has
Little tiny
about
hands.
having access to other people's bodies. And you get to tell any lie you want as long as you know, I was talking to a young man the other day who I love very much, and we were bemoaning the state of gentlemen in the world, and he was talking about, well, you know, Miss Samsarah, you just gotta understand that some men are taught that they get to say whatever they want to get the pussy. And I was like, really? Yeah. Not me though. But you know, some guys are raised that way. And I was like, okay. Thank you for letting me know. But you know, and unfortunately that sociopathic worldview is the time we're living in. I get to say whatever I want to say to sell you the product. You know? I get to say whatever I want to say to get you to go out with me or
Vote for me.
Vote for me. I'm gonna say whatever I think you want me to say to get the job. I mean, that's considered normal. Actually, that's part of the reason why people did, you know, elect the president that we got, because he, you know, he's a businessman. He said, I can get things done, right? I tell a million lies and I get things done, and that's part of why he got the job. There's a whole bunch of other things, but I really wanted to thank you for bringing that up, and that's one of the things I really want for us to be challenged around and to look at in our individual lives. How do we not allow ourselves to be placed in a little box? Like, you know, I announce I'm a Catholic woman, that's a box. You know, I'm a Black woman, that's a box. And how do we not allow that to happen to ourselves? Why don't we sit down and have these conversations to actually get to know one another and know what it means when I say I'm a Catholic woman? You know, when my sister says she's a feminist, what does that mean? Because it's not one version of that. I hope to God there never will be just one version of those things. We have one more question and then we're gonna stop. It's you.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to figure out how to reconfigure my question in light of the answers that you guys just gave. I guess I'll start with my background. I'm an activist in the broader movement for Black Lives. I'm not affiliated with the Black Lives Matter movement, Black Lives Matter organization, but I'm a part of the movement. And also from Atlanta. And I remember like getting involved in some work with SisterSong and like kind of like hanging around like the annoying younger sister in the reproductive justice and reproductive justice work. And I think what kind of like kept me from diving in was the language of, you know, women and men, and women who give birth, and then men who assist the women that give birth. Mm-hmm. And as a queer woman, that wasn't my dig. I was like, you know, sometimes it's cool to hang out with men. I don't know if I see them like as life partners. They could have sex with, but not like, I don't want them openly raise kids. And so I guess, and my question was originally, how do we kind of like, where do you both see yourselves in broadening the language of where reproductive justice has sat for a long time, and sometimes, you know, depending on what side of the country you're on, still sits. But I guess, you know, I'm thinking, you know, I don't really know what my question is now. I think, yeah, I'm just digesting what you guys were saying about, you know, when it comes to specifically trans-inclusive feminism and like and how that plays out in reproductive justice work, and the same thing for queer folks and non-heteronormative folks. Mm-hmm. You know, ellipses.
Okay.
Word.
For me, I love all the contradictions, first of all. And I love me some men's. I ain't got no problem with saying that, living that. Grew up with great dad, great 5 brothers, cool roots that go back to 1844. So, you know, my family's strong, rural, grounded in the land, and we know. But the same men that I love, some of them commit sexual abuse, and they family still. And so we have to deal with these questions, not in theory, but in lived relationships. Because childhood sexual abuse in my family is multi-generation. We trace it all the way back to my grandmother's generation. And are seeking ways to hold men accountable in our family while loving them. So this ain't theory for me. This is, how do you go to the next family reunion and you telling your brother who's dying of cancer that you love him even though he incested his daughter? That's a real conversation going on in our family. So that's where I stand and I come from. This ain't, to me, like I said, theory. Within SisterSong, we started our Queer People of Color Caucus in 2006 because this was a question that was raised within SisterSong, whether or not we created a framework that was inclusive, but by having the name Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective, was that sending off an inclusive message? And that is a continuing conversation that has not been resolved, but I'm so old school on this. I'm willing to include everybody if the requirement for inclusion doesn't invisibilize me. I ain't trading off my visibility for your liberation. That just is never a deal I can go for. And for Black women, for whom even the definition of being a woman is still contested, think how they treat Serena Williams.
Thank you.
You know, I'm not quite so sure that we should be having a conversation on those terms. Who gets to be defined as a woman is still an issue for Black women, much less trans folks, trans women. It's far more complicated than any of the discourse I'm hearing being offered. Because the problem is once we deconstruct people's identities as a way to solve oppression, what you've done is address the symptom and not the cause. And that's where postmodernism really has gone crazy. You know, they think that the way to end oppression is to end the identities that create the oppression. No, it ain't the identities that's the oppressive thing, it's how you use them. You know, and so I don't have an easy answer, but I will say that those of us whose identity as a woman is central to who we are, me being a woman is as important to me as me being a descendant of Africans. And there is no deal I can figure out that works for me that causes me to lose my identity in the service of your oppression. I can't see where that comes from for me. I wrote a chapter in my new book on trans issues and reproductive justice, though, knowing that I was not coming from that standpoint. But I am an expert on reproductive justice, and I can migrate that framework to any population and understand how they are included in the framework. I might not have done justice to it, but I wouldn't let the book get published without it. Okay? And because I'm also have never been incarcerated, but I made sure that was in the book.
Yeah.
You know, I have never had to present citizenship papers in the United States, but I made sure that was in the book. You know, inclusion does not mean exclusion. And anybody who offers that as a solution, I think needs to do a little bit more work on broadening their analysis. But that's a slutty crawl. And I've got a lot to learn. I've got a lot to learn. So I'm not saying where I am is where I will be next week. You know, and the other thing I'll say about that is that I have had so many intentional conversations with trans men, trans women, and people on the gender continuum, and I'm detecting almost like a left, a center, and a right within that community. There is no one perspective that speaks for all people who are trans. And so I see trans people like Catherine Cross, who has an analysis, her analysis. I would wish I was that damn smart. I mean, because anything Catherine Cross writes, you need to read and absorb in your skin. Just split up her skin and stick it there, you know. But then I hear other people write about trans issues, and I'm like, do y'all realize how much y'all sound like white supremacy? Because every marginalized social location isn't a good place to deconstruct white supremacy from. You know? Otherwise, the rest of the country would have gotten the memo about Trump that the 94% of black women got.
Right.
So I'm just saying.
94%.
Yeah, 94%.
Damn,
Damn, all of us, we got that memo. And do you know the majority of the people who knew not to vote for Trump weren't even college educated?
I believe it.
The majority of the black women who did not vote for Trump were not college educated. So it's not a matter of how much education you have, it's how much you drank in the Kool-Aid of white supremacy.
That'll preach. That's the faithful.
Well, talking stuff is what I do.
And do it very well. Looking at these questions as a birth worker, I just want to say that, you know, I, again, just want to go back to the deep, powerful, beautiful mystery that humanity is. And I look forward to more trans persons writing about their experience in birth. I look forward to hearing that there have always been lesbian folks, there's always been gay folks, there's always been trans folks. This is not a new thing. They've always been with us. And through the process of white supremacy and bigoted hatred, their stories have been lost. And that's not something that's my purview to touch. But I do hope that folks go into their prayer and to their ancestors and find those stories or create new ones for the modern day. Because it is painful when you're working with gay and lesbian families and then, you know, all you have is like, you know, the Russian water birth video, which is very beautiful, but it's all these, you know, mostly white people, mostly straight people having babies. Like there are people having babies, all different kinds of people having babies. And so I look forward to this part of the rebirth that we're living in right now, that those stories will come out. And then that beauty will be shown. And then the only normalizing that will happen is that we'll all know these beautiful, different, amazing ways that people have their babies. I know presently today, as a doula, I'm very protective of my gay and lesbian families. I know that they're not going to be treated respectfully if they're in a hospital setting trying to have their babies. I encourage them to have their babies at home in love and light in their community, whether I'm their birth worker or not. I'm very honored when, even though I get things wrong and I'm not perfect, that gay and lesbian families still choose me to serve them. And I do my absolute utmost to love them massively. And so that's what I do. Doulas, we serve. And I'm honored to do that. And I really look forward to, hopefully, in years to come, that we'll be seeing more of these rich stories, just celebrating the diversity of how people have other people at the end of the day. So
Can I just say one more
Please.
thing about the trans issue, because this occurred to me. One of the things I discovered in writing that chapter is the forced sterilization of trans people in order to claim their gender identities. I think there's a body of people who have a long history of forced sterilization they need to have conversation with.
hello.
Okay.
Yep.
The second thing that came up is hormone therapy. You know, and there's a whole body of people who have a long history with the dangers of hormone therapy and stuff.
Absolutely.
Again, that's a conversation that needs to be happening, but we can't have it as long as we objectify the other.
That's a beautiful point on which to stop. I want to thank you all again for being here. Please eat more food. Please, if you would like to buy books, please do so. If you want me to sign my book, if the books that, Loretta's books that you bought, you want her to sign them, please come chat with us. Happy International Midwives Day.
Thank y'all. And my next book will be out in November.
Get the card.
Get the card.
And you know, I'd
You want
like
to pass
to,
them out, take some extras, feel free.
I would like to end this time together with singing our international traditional center for childbearing song. So we get to learn that and put that out of respect for our beautiful sister Shadia Monroe, who I am one of her certified trainers, and so we have all of our beautiful young doulas here. Yeah, so let's all stand up
We all
and
got a lot of
sing.
thinking to do on this
Yeah,
stuff.
we do. So, we ready? The folks who know it can sing it with me, and everybody else can chime in. So it goes like this. I love being a midwife, deep down in my soul. I love being a midwife, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, say down, down, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, say down, down, deep down in my soul. I love being a doula, deep down in my soul. I love being a doula, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, I say down, down, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, I say down, down, deep down in my soul. I love being a healer, deep down in my soul. I love being a healer, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, I say down, down, deep down in my soul. I say deep, deep, I say down, down, deep down in my soul. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
And there's cake.
And there's cake. Have cake. Eat food.
Yeah. So,